My name is Ernesto Marrero. Miami-Dade College, Kendall campus, and currently I am majoring in pre-vet with a track in zoology. It was like it was like the polar opposite of the life of someone from the city. So it was like a complete 180. Um, we spent 7 days in a cabin in the mountains of Tennessee and living off the grid with all kinds of wildlife and forests all over us, and it was this constant immersion in nature that was unfounded for someone who lives in a city. Um, in that sense, what stood out to me most was the birds. Waking up every morning to dozens of different bird calls all at once, and they ranged. I mean, I stood up until like we had to do tasks, so that was like 8 a.m. So I woke up 6:30 a.m. till 8. I spent 1.5 hours out there just listening to the birds and like picking out individual bird songs, trying to see if I could see any of them. The only one that I could see was the red cardinals because those were the most like obvious because they're so red. But you could pick out individual bird calls all throughout the morning, and it was just beautiful. It was just beautiful. All in the afternoon too, but the morning was what stood out to me most. The moment I got into that house, it was like if I felt right at home. The only thing I had to adjust really was, the schedule that I had used to, but I fit right into what I had to do. I did everything that I had to do. I mean, I was comfortable with. I didn't feel uncomfortable at all with anything. Like, not the compost toilets, not living with no actual air conditioning, not living, nothing. I mean, nothing made me uncomfortable. I was 100% comfortable. In fact, I was more comfortable than I've ever been here. So I was in my zone, truly. After breakfast, we would have the heart to heart. So what we would do is we would sit down and Bill or Mitzi would read a piece that was significant to the day. And after that, we would reflect on it by passing a stone to each of us. And whoever had the stone had the right of way, basically. Like they had the floor and they could talk for however long they wanted. And they could comment on whatever happened the day prior, or however they were feeling in the moment. And they would pass it on to the next person. When it reaches the end of the circle and it comes back around, people would actually comment on every other person's comments. So we would have discussions basically, and that's why it's called heart to heart. After the heart to heart, we would have whatever task was delegated for the day. So it could be, for us, it was either gardening or it was planting trees. And the first day, which was Wednesday, when we had those first tasks, I did tree planting, and we were planting. I think they were cedars, and it was like we planted 50 in my team, my shift, planted 50 of these trees in a clearing, and then the next day, which is Thursday, we went gardening in the local garden where they actually grow the food for the people, for us to eat. After that, we would have 2 hours of alone time. So what we would do, there was 2 to 4 p.m. And when 2 hit, you would have basically free time to do whatever you want. What I did the first day was I basically explored the property. I literally went around whatever road. We had a map on us, so they gave us a map prior to alone time, and they explained to us like, what the property lines are, what major mile markers you're supposed to expect when you're looking around, and so I did that. I ended up going down a hill, and with no trail. So I started on a trail, and I didn't go. I decided to be adventurous and get out of the trail. So since it was like a small property, I wasn't scared of getting lost or anything like that. So I went off the trail, and I ended up like down by a creek that was in the bottom of the hill. So we're on top of a hill, and I went down this way and ended up on the creek. And I followed the creek alongside to a prairie, or like a open field almost, and kept following it along like almost like a road, like the road that led up to the cabin. And I ended up all the way up top of a hill that was a farmhouse, overlooking a farmhouse. And I just sat there, and they told us to find a quiet spot during our alone time, which was a place where that was actually one of the readings. One of the readings that they did, that Mitzi did, was about a Native American story about finding your alone space, your quiet place, where we would be. It would be our secret place where we would sit down and just listen to nature. So I did that. I found the creek and I went up that hill and I just sat there, overlooking the whole forest basically. And that was my first quiet place. Quiet Place was from a reading that we had in one of the Heart to Hearts. Mitzi read a book about a Native American story about a young boy whose grandma had talked to him about a concept of Native American history that they had quiet places. So the boy asked his grandma, the boy had found a quiet place just by coincidence, and he had told his grandma that she was too near his. And the boy, basically they got talking, and the grandma was like, we all have quiet places, we just don't talk about it. And so the concept was that you find a place in nature where you are alone, where you feel connected to nature, and you just sit there and listen and become a part of nature without becoming, because when you're walking through the forest, you're very loud and you're not really part of it. So when you're in your quiet place, you become part of it. My first quiet place was on top of that hill that I followed along the creek. And the reason I chose it was mostly because of the view, because I could see over the entire property. And so I just sat there and, I just overlooked the creek and the forest and the property. And it made me realize how beautiful Tennessee is. It's such a beautiful country or state. And so I guess the next quiet place that I chose was actually when I was going down the same day. I chose two the same day. So I was going down the hill trying to get back in time. I was almost late. I was trying to get back in time before 6 or before 4. And I was going down this hill, the hill that I was on top of from the creek. And I went down an embankment and a cliff. And it was like a cliff. It was a small cliff, but I had to jump down it. And I crossed like a dirt gravel path, and I climbed up a hill that was already there, but there was no path or anything. There was no trail. So I climbed up that hill, and I was like, I think I know where I am. I mean, I'm following. I had my phone on me, so I had my compass on, and I knew I was following north. So I knew that the cabin was north. So I just followed in the general direction of north, and I kept climbing these like really steep hills. And coming from Miami, you don't expect super steep hills, so it was a workout in itself. But I used trees to like leverage myself, climbed up till I got to the top, and there was a clearing, and there was a house. It was a random cabin there, and I was like, this is not on the map. Where am I? And I walked up to the house, and I saw there was like a truck there and a road, like a paved road. And I was like, and I saw there was an air conditioning unit, and I was like, this is not part of Narrow Ridge. This is connected to the grid. So I was like, oh boy, where am I? And so I checked the map, and there was no basic. I basically didn't know where I was. So I took the compass. I went north. So I went east, and I just walked east until I found something that I recognized. And finally, I got to the paved road that led to the lodge. One of the guy that was planting trees, he found me. He drove up behind me, and he's like, "Hey man, you lost?" And I was like, "Yeah, kind of. Do you know where the lodge is?" And he was like, "Yeah, it's up there." And behind him he had Bean, his little dog. So that was irrelevant, but Bean was there, so it was pretty cool. And so I walked back to the lodge, and I got there with 1 minute to spare before time was called, before dinner, basically. So those are quiet places. And for the alone time, I basically did the same thing. Sometimes I hung out with people. Sometimes we went together. Sometimes we explored different places that we found out about. One time we went to the library. It was a library that they had down there, and we went with a group of people. Other time we went to the creek. But yeah, it was supposed to be a long time, but it was just about exploring the property. After a long time, it was dinner time. So we would do the gratefulness circle again, and we would say what we were grateful for, and then the chores again for the afternoon, and then we would have dinner. And after dinner, it depends on the day, but on one of the days, it was we had the night walk after, so we didn't go immediately to do sleep or anything like that. And so that day we put on a bunch of layers on because it was really cold. It was like 45 or 50 degrees out, and we went out in a group in a truck first. In the trucks we went out to this open space on top of a hill that let you see all the stars in all their glory. Unfortunately, there was a full moon that day, so we didn't see all the stars in all their glory, but there was way more than we would see here in Miami. And I mean, the full moon was pretty cool anyways, but after the looking at the stars and finding the different constellations, we walked into the woods. And the crazy part is that apparently, according to Bill and Mitzi, it was supposed to be like pure dark. So you're not supposed to see anything. You're supposed to just use your senses. But the fact that the full moon was out there meant that like we could see for miles. So it was like a huge lantern in the sky. It was all blue and you could see perfectly fine. So it didn't really serve the purpose that they wanted it to, which was to like connect to your other senses apart from your sight. But it was still cool nonetheless. Um, and then after that, we went to sleep. Some of us, but me and some other people personally did not really want to sleep because we wanted to take in the whole experience fully. So we stayed up really late and we just like walked around the edge of the property, not far away, the edge of the property, just looking at how nightlife was there and just looking at the stars, reading, just hanging out. So that was most of my days, truly. The heart to hearts were the biggest impact for me because it was a moment that I like a chance to express my emotions with people that I didn't know for the first time in my life. And even with people that I did know, I had a lot of trouble expressing my emotions. So the fact that I got to just talk for however long I wanted to, and nobody interrupted me, it was incredible. And it changed me so much so that I don't remember how I dealt with my emotions prior to going to this trip. So now I'm like a completely different person. And it's incredible how much of a connection you could form with people that you didn't know prior just by sitting down with them and having such close connections and having such close emotional ties to them in the short amount of time. So that was the most impact. Digital detox. I forgot about that. I mean, the same way that I forgot about my phone the entire time. It was actually so instant. Like it was like if I was meant to let go of my phone in that moment. I got there was obviously no internet, so my brain was like, all right, you can't use it, so whatever, we'll just put it away. Never used it again. The only times I used it was for taking pictures. And it was so relieving, almost. I personally never had an addiction to my phone. I never grew up with a phone, so I had a phone like when I was in 8th grade, so it was way later than everybody else did. But either way, like I still found that I used it, and I still do use it, like even now, as a big part of my life. And just being able to let go, being able to have no worries, and not having to scroll through Instagram, wasting time and all that stuff. In these 7 days, since I had nothing to do in these 5 to 6 hours where I usually use my phone, I filled them up with drawing and reading and talking to people. So in these 7 days, I drew more on my sketchbook than I have ever drawn in my entire life. That sketchbook got filled up more than it ever has. It was empty before. I brought it in empty. And by the end of the time, it was like 6 pages filled with like different sketches of different animals. Finished, by the way. Because I usually leave them like empty or like halfway finished and I finish them later. No, these were 6 finished pieces. And that's how I spent most of my time. And reading too, I got halfway through a big book. Something that I had never had time to do because of school mostly. And just life doesn't let you do that stuff. The digital detox, what it does is like, it takes you away from this environment that your phone creates where like it's a little bubble. And it gives you the chance to look out and listen a lot. And yeah, man, like it really does, because it makes you realize that you're part of this, that you're not just a different thing, that you're not, because in the city, like I always say, like in the city, you're not part of this. Like, yeah, you have trees and all and birds, but they're just birds and trees. Like over there, you're part of it, and you rely on it because you are living outside of the grid. You need to be cooled by the earth. So the way that the cooling for the building does is that it's based on the soil temperature. It was like 56 degrees. So it remains 56 degrees the whole time. So we were cooled. We were literally being kept cool by earth. And of course the solar panels kept the electricity going and the water was from the wells. So it's like we were relying on earth. If we didn't have earth here, we wouldn't be alive. We wouldn't have survived those 7 days. So it was, and again, you don't really realize that when you're on your phone. You don't. So it like brings you away from that, and it really takes you away. And even when I came back, I sometimes just sit or lower my window on my car, turn off the music, and just listen to wildlife. To whatever wildlife, the little wildlife we have here. And ever since I've literally learned the species of all the birds here. That's what I spent my free time doing. I just listen and look and see and bird watch here, which I didn't even think was possible because I didn't think there was much birds here, but there's actually a lot. There's a lot of variety. It allows you to realize, like I said, that that you're part of it, and that this is not what we're meant to live in. This is not what we're meant to be, that what we evolved to live in. What we evolved to live in was out there, and that's why we felt so comfortable being in there, even as city kids our whole lives. We just fit right in. At least I did, um, because we're meant to be live like that. We're not meant to live with cars or with buildings or with skyscrapers. It's just not natural. So it brings you back to your humanity and makes you realize that it's not humans and animals. It's animals. We're all animals. We're all part of the natural world. Take more pictures, I think, because you're in that mentality of I don't want to use my phone. I don't want to use my phone, and you're not going to because you can't. There's no internet. You can't. You literally can't do anything on your phone. So, but still do take pictures because thankfully I had a lot of people in my group that were photographers, but some people might not. People might not have that experience. So, be that person who takes pictures because looking back now, that's what brings us back to that place. And I mean, even a day after, it felt like a memory. It felt like nostalgic because of the pictures. And I would not remember all the things that I did if it weren't for the pictures that I took. So take pictures. That's something. Bring. I did the right thing. I brought things to do when I was in free time. So if you're into sketching, bring sketchbook. If you're in a painting, there was a guy that was in a painting. Really cool guy. He painted like a bunch of scenery, and it was really cool. Something that I do regret is I didn't sleep. So even though I don't regret it kind of because I did make the most of like the nightlife and all that and socializing, I do feel like I interrupted a lot of people's sleep. So I'm not cool with that. So if you're going to talk in the night, if you're a night owl like me, go outside of the lodge. Don't interrupt people's sleep. It's not fair to them and everyone could hear everything right next to you. So yeah, and it's not that scary. The reason we were inside is because we thought it was scary because we heard a raccoon once and we were like, ugh, no, but inside. But it was just a raccoon. Like I realized after it was just a raccoon. There's not really any big predators or anything like that, or Bigfoots. There's nothing like that. It's pretty beautiful out even at night. Talk to Bill. Bill is an awesome guy and I feel like people love him, but people don't really listen as much. And that guy will talk about anything in that forest for ages. Just listen to him. Ask him questions, and you'll notice that he's really, really interested in talking to people about stuff. So definitely talk to Bill. And also the other residents, because the other residents, people are like, we kind of like pass by them, but they're cool too. They're cool people too. And they could even talk to you about how they're living their sustainable house. Because they're the normal people that came into it, not like Bill and Mitzi, which were kind of like, that the whole purpose was to build this place. No, they came in, they bought land, and they're making it sustainable on their own. So talk to them and prepare yourself for a vegan diet. It's not a big jump, really, because you're still eating, there's still proteins in there, and there's still all the things you need, but they're gonna come from something else. And I am personally a big meat eater, so coming away from eating, chicken and eggs and steak, I mean, that changed me completely, and it made me realize that, damn, I eat a lot of meat. So I won't lie, I never got used to it. I never got used to not having meat. I did like when I came back and had that chicken breast again. I was like, finally. But at the same time, it made me like step away from the fact that it made me step away from thinking that vegan food was bad. That it was all like nasty lettuce, all that. It's not actually. It's actually really good. And you can make some great stuff with beans, apparently. Like lentils are really good they actually really sometimes make it taste like meat. It was crazy. We had like these oatmeal burgers and they tasted like meat. It was so weird because we had been missing meat for like 4 days and we were like, oh, this one tastes bad. We tasted it, it tasted like a burger. It tastes better than a burger actually. So I was like, wow. So yeah, be prepared for a vegan diet. Well, given that there's been like a couple months since it happened, I've had time to experiment and the first few days, you do want to get rid of it and you do want to say, I'm rid of it. I'm never going to use my phone again. But man, it's like if it requires it here, it's like almost as like you're required to use it. So I went right back to using my phone and to the bad habits again in like a week. But if I didn't require it, if I was living like I want to live, I wouldn't even have a phone, honestly. I would have like a landline, if anything. So definitely that, like I wouldn't have a smartphone. And it made me more wary of technology in a way, because the more, like even, you guys know the Apple headset thing that came out recently? That, I was like super suspicious of that, because that's taking away more from from the world. So I was like, like before I was like, okay, I want to try this. It's really cool. I want to like, but now I'm like, nothing that takes me that much away, because eventually it'll just lead to completely being away from that. So it opened my eyes to that. And obviously now, if I were to compare myself to someone who didn't do this and me, I feel like people who didn't do it would be more keen to be on their phone in certain like situations, whereas I would be more taking it into my personal self. Like I would be taking in the surroundings of it more, and then maybe taking pictures. Whereas before I would have been more like, okay, I want to take pictures for the future, for memories in the future. No, like I want the memories in my actual memories, because that's where it truly matters. Being able to tell stories instead of showing pictures is something that I'm more excited to do than trying. Like I'm more excited to tell stories than show pictures.